I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the witnesses for your testimony here today. And I would just say at the outset, as I look at the effect that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act has had on our economy, as we sit here today, we arguably have the best economy we've had in 25 years. If you look at the statistics, low unemployment rate, lowest in almost 60 years. We got more people working in this country than ever before. You look at the rates of unemployment in the African American community, the Hispanic community, young people working. You look at the amount of people we've moved off food stamps. Almost 5.5 million have moved off food stamps in the last 2 years as a direct result of more capital in the economy, more people working, private sector wages are up. By every indication, we are back on track. And if you look at the polling, Gallup polling that just came out in the last month of the middle class, 70% are more optimistic this year than they were last year. So the trend continues as a direct result of giving more money back to hard-earned people whether it's lower class people, middle class people, or people that make higher incomes, and that's good for the economy. I just want to switch focus a little bit on the tax credits here. I want to submit for the record a letter that I was a part of, along with my colleague Dave Loebsack of Iowa, in support of the biodiesel tax credit. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit that for the record. Thank you. And when I look at the tax credit that's been in place for biodiesel, in a rural community like mine, where we have the 8th largest congressional district in terms of corn and soybean production in the country, and when I look at biodiesel tax credit and what that's done for my district and lots of rural districts, it's been extremely beneficial. Supports almost 60,000 jobs in that industry, whether it's I have a number of ADM facilities. I got another ethanol plant, Marquis Energy, that's involved with that. And I've seen the direct benefits of that in my district. I'd also like to talk a little bit about the short line rail tax credit. And my district has 19 counties. Again, very rural, a lot of land, but the short line rail industry has benefited from that tax credit in terms of getting products to market, working with the larger rail systems to put in place one of the most efficient systems that we have in terms of shipping products around the country. Both of those have been, I think, extremely beneficial, not only to my district, but the country. And I guess as we look at the policy issue of how do we look at expensing on a permanent basis, and I guess, Mr. Pomerleau, I was going to ask you, some believe that expensing should be temporary or reserved to stimulate the economy during a recession. Do you believe that expensing should be made permanent policy? And can you expound on that?
Yeah, I think one of the more important improvements that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act made to the structure of the federal tax code was allowing companies to expense their investments in the first year. In general, this is a pretty powerful tool to encourage investment in that it effectively eliminates that investment from the tax base, and thus you'd see additional capital stock from that incentive. A downside, of course, is right now it's temporary. It's set to phase out. So the effects of it over the next 10 years are going to be less than what we would expect if it were made permanent.
Can you also talk about the importance of the low corporate rate and what that's done for the economy?
Yeah, so the previous to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the federal corporate tax rate, the statutory rate, not effective tax rate, was 35%. One of the big downsides to having a rate that high, especially in a world in which statutory rates elsewhere are much lower, is it creates an incentive for companies to shift profits and some intellectual property overseas to avoid the U.S. tax. Bringing the federal tax rate down to 21% lined it up more closely with our largest trading partners. It reduced that incentive. So this will be a benefit to our tax base. It will. So now we're losing revenue, of course, but the incentive to shift those profits has declined.
Thank you. Those are all my questions.